family and friends of murdered Malungelo Booi are gathering in the Eastern Cape of Matatiele this morning. That's where the Fort Hare University law student is being laid to rest. The 23-year-old was killed last month, and her boyfriend Matatiele has been charged with the murder. Our senior reporter Malungelo Booi joins us now live from Matatiele ahead of that funeral service. Malungelo, very good morning to you. I can see that proceedings are well underway and that the funeral service is moving now as you're at the cemetery.
That's right, Mpo. In fact, what we're currently seeing, we're seeing some of the mourners starting to gather here at Malungelo Boi's family home, and this is where everything will be taking place. In fact, her body arrived here just around 5:30 this morning, and before it was brought into the yard, what we saw that there was a ritual that was done. In a way, her father and some of the family elders, in fact, before her body was brought into the house, there was a slaughtering that took place outside, and we saw some of the relatives speaking to Malungelo. But also, when the body then came inside the house and was received by some of the elders, including the mothers in this village and also in her home, we saw some of the people actually confirming indeed there was that short valedictory service where one of the men was actually confirming to the men that yes, indeed, the person that is inside the coffin is Malungelo Booi. So inside the roundabout, where you'd actually see Malungelo Boi's coffin, actually is at the center. It's surrounded by some of the women in this village, but also some of her siblings, and also her mother is also there. So what's likely then to happen, Mpo, is that when all that is done, Malungelo will then be laid to rest. Actually, where we are, it's also at her family home, and we're told that everything is going to be happening this morning. So what we're expecting later on then is that the service will also hear an official program where government officials will also be speaking. One of the persons that will be addressing those that will be gathering here is the Minister of Higher Education, Dr. Blade Nzimande, is one of the people that will be addressing those attending this service. We're also expecting though people from the Fort Hare University. That's where Malungelo was doing her final year in law, and before really she was murdered and her body was dismembered and was dumped on the streets really of Whitney last month. It's an incident, Mpo, that left many people in Whitney and also in this province, and I dare say also in this country, shocked, and also people seeking justice. Mpo?
People were shocked, seeking justice, asking a lot of questions. We're also learning that the traumatized tenants are fleeing the house where Malungelo Booi was murdered, really just speaking to the amount of shock that has been experienced, especially in the manner in which she was killed.
Well, Mpo, that was bound to happen. Remember when we were there, a lot of people were already telling us that, one, they're battling to sleep and they feel like that particular property is being haunted. And a lot of people actually is saying that they want to move out. And I suppose, Mpo, people moving out of a property where they're battling to sleep in is something that was bound to happen. But also, Mpo, for me, when we go back to that scene and we listen to the people that stayed in that property, and people saying that they are still traumatized because, one, they knew Malungelo, and two, they also knew, her alleged murderer, who happened to be her boyfriend. We're told that's a man who's 25 years old, Matatiele, who the National Prosecuting Authority in fact told us that he in fact confessed to murdering this 23-year-old. But we also know, though, when he was arrested, for that, police also discovered some drugs in his pockets. So there's a lot that, each time when one talks about this story. And I remember being, in East London for about a week, and every day I was reporting on this story. New shocking details would emerge about this particular incident.
With these shocking developments that emerged, I know that you were also curious before we knew, before the name of Aluta was revealed to the public, on the type of characteristics he bore. You were asking people to describe him and the type of person he is. What did you uncover throughout that process?
It's actually quite interesting because, when you speak to people in Quidney, especially on Fleet Street and Fitzpatrick, that's where, the incident took place. And a lot of people who stayed in that house and a lot of people who interacted with the accused, they would tell you that he was a soft-spoken person, but also he was a loner, a person who did not like to mix with people a lot. But also, what has been interesting, though, is to hear the kind of work that he did. Some people would say that he sold, funeral policies for one of the funeral parlors in East London. But also some people are also saying that at some point of his life he worked as a bouncer. So when he appeared in court, I think it's also interesting to speak about his demeanor when he was in court. He walked in, his face partially covered, and this man is massive. And one thing for sure, Mpo, is that this young girl did not stand a chance in defending herself against Upasile.
So how far are we now when it comes to the actual murder case and the developments in court following that appearance?
Well, Mpo, the matter was postponed, as you would know, to the 28th of September, which is later this month, and for further investigation. But he had already indicated, though, that he would actually not be applying for bail, which for some people is already quite telling.
And as you stand there, Malungelo, at the family home of Malungelo Booi, what is the mood? Of course, is a somber one, but what else are you reading out of that atmosphere as the family bids farewell to their daughter?
Well, look, Mpo, when a family has lost a loved one, obviously I've seen this family. I've seen them when they were visiting the scene of the crime, and I've also seen them at the memorial service, all of this in East London, and I'm also seeing them today. It's a family that is in pain. It's a family that is struggling to come to terms with their loss. Remember, Malungelo Booi was going to be the first graduate to come out of this home, and there were a lot of expectations from this family, but also from the community. You'd know that if Matatiele falls under the Alfred Nzo District Municipality, which is one of the poorest regions in the country. Poverty levels are actually quite high here. Service delivery really is something that is not there, really is bare minimal. And so there was hope that this young girl was actually going to lift her family and also lift this particular community and become that beacon of hope.
And how have community members, before we let you go, Malungelo, how have community members reacted to the news, especially because the graphic details that you described when this really devastating story first broke, of how various parts of her body were still in the alleged murderer's house, and those graphic details which sent shockwaves across the country? What reaction have you received from community members there in Matatiele?
I mean, we arrived here yesterday, so I also want to show you some of the people that are starting to gather now. So we arrived here yesterday, Mpo, and interestingly enough, I spoke to a couple of local residents about this particular incident, and obviously people are angry people want justice, but people are shocked at the manner of how this happened. And they're hoping that ultimately that, justice will prevail. Now you can see some of the mourners that are gathering here at the Mdebeni family home, obviously to bid farewell to Unosicelo Mdebeni. Service then is expected to get underway at around 8 o'clock, and one of the people that is expected to be here is the Minister of Higher Education, Blade Nzimande. We're also expecting, though, later on, I think it is important to note that later on at around mid-morning, perhaps, that the family of Unosicelo Mdebeni will then talk to some of the journalists. Remember, the family hasn't spoken that much, really, since this tragedy.
Let's leave it there for now. Malungelo Booi, our senior reporter out there in Matatiele.